like a soap opera. Just because it's so smooth. And there's no blurring, maybe.
I think there's still blurring, but that higher frame rate, like it seems too like realistic.
Yeah. Yeah, it pulls me out. Like I see that these are actors on a stage.
Sometimes, like when my dad and I got our first 4K TV, it was like brand new. You could, when you watched big blockbuster movies, you could see it looked really fake because you could tell the CGI and stuff. You could see it, and it was like, you know, it wasn't meant to be viewed in 4K.
Okay, so we are now live.
Okay, great.
All right, should I do a little intro thing?
Yeah, let's do it.
All right. Coming to you live from Noisebridge Hackerspace in San Francisco, California, this is Hack Day. Will we talk about stuff that matters? Who knows? Who cares? It's Hack Day. Alrighty, let's begin.
I forgot to set up the camera before we...
Is it set up now?
Yeah, it is.
Okay, great. You start up if you like, or.
Yeah, cool. So, welcome to Hack Days. That's an exciting intro.
Woohoo!
Woo! Hack Days, if you don't know, it's basically we get together every Sunday, and it's like your favorite nerds talking to other favorite nerds. And, it could be anything from, latest in Bitcoin to movies we've seen to whatever comes up. And Hack Days is only, I guess, it is the people that show up ultimately, right? So you never know what you're going to get. And nothing is planned, and we don't have any speakers that are here. I'm surprised people show up every week. It's really, it's nice. I'm surprised I show up every week. And just kidding. So at Noisebridge, we're hosting Hack Days at Noisebridge. And Noisebridge is a non-profit hackerspace. It's a volunteer run. So what that means is when you come into Noisebridge, you get to play with all these really cool, wonderful tools and all this really cool equipment, and you have a space, kind of a community space where you can hang out and chat with other hackers and work on pretty much anything you want. So if you're in the San Francisco Bay Area and you want to check out a really neat kind of communal space that everyone takes care of and participates in, you should check it out. We're at noisebridge.net. We're over on 18th. I think it's 18th Division, right?
Yep.
18th, 17th. Okay. We're on mission, and the only rule in Noisebridge, which is also one of our rules, is be excellent to each other. Yes. So without further ado, we're live at Hack Days. Anyone?
Let's go. I mean, we were just having a discussion of film rate and the dreaminess of video, but it occurs to me that there's a couple of people who just randomly showed up, as you were talking about the random showing up of people.
Yeah.
So maybe it's cool for us to hear from them, and you may need to be nearer to your mic if you want to.
You can switch to me.
You can come over here, or
That's actually a good space for someone on that corner, so
I can
people
rotate
can share
this.
that mic.
Can we just take that tiny little mic and put it right there?
You want me to move over there?
That's a
That would work too, actually.
yeah, that's good. So we have two people per mic.
Okay, cool.
Okay.
Woohoo!
yeah, we can just No, let's not remove this mic, because I have no idea how that's going to sound relative to everything else. Because you don't get that mic on your...
I don't get that mic in my feed.
So it seems like a nice discussion while this is happening is audio.
Yeah.
So we have an interesting situation here. We have several mics and several people. And it's being managed by Cameron, who had brought this very nice gear to do this with. And it's just interesting to look at what is being done here, which is at least 3 mics and better than HD video quality streaming. As recently as the late 1980s, it would have been difficult to do this with a semi-truck worth of equipment.
Yeah.
Just the broadcasting itself required a van with a mast, such as you still see nowadays by some trucks that would actually raise the radar dish and beam microwave versions of signal to a receiving satellite. So
These trucks do that still.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah, and so it would not have been possible at all without those back then. You have mixing boards, you have mics, you have film cameras, and this can all fit in, say, a couple of backpacks, and this is even more extensive than might be needed. So that's just pretty cool.
And to put it in perspective, I think the first time I saw video conferencing happen was in the Max Headroom. I mean, a little Star Trek, technically.
Yeah.
Right, in the 70s. But, like, I guess in a business setting where it was like, oh, this is the future of business, was in Max Headroom series. I don't know if anyone remembers that from the 80s.
It was pretty lumpy, but pretty cool.
Yeah.
What was that?
It was a show based on this Max Headroom character who I think originally was created for a Coca-Cola commercial.
Really?
Or some kind of commercial. It just took off, and then they made a series about it. And you still see that actor, who's a good actor. You still see him showing up in other shows.
Altered Carbon.
Altered Carbon most recently. But it was basically a late 80s sort of cyberpunk and almost pre-cyberpunk attempt to do a discussion of a future that was half Mad Max, half virtual reality, and it was also like half media criticism, talking about how TV is too powerful while it was on television, which was all pretty fun.
Which character from Altered Carbon?
He plays the character who is
Wait,
running.
wait, can you give that away? That's kind of a spoiler.
Okay, then I won't give that away.
It is. It is. I honestly, we probably shouldn't have even mentioned that he was on that show. But
Yeah,
it's-
but I thought he
it's
did
great.
fine with that role, and I always thought he's a very good character actor in general. Like, he was also very good whenever he showed up on the show Eureka, if people recall that one.
This is an older person.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay.
but-
Excuse you.
No,
They're
but,
on the 80th that are a kid actor.
Yeah.
right? Either way. He's well preserved. I honestly don't know how, if they're just keeping him in a cryogenic chamber between shows. I actually don't understand. But yeah.
If you watch the show, you'll know.
Yeah, absolutely. It's all clear. But yeah, so that's audio, and I guess things are set up now.
Yeah.
Yeah, they're relatively set up. I'm not entirely happy with this, to be quite honest. But then again, I'm never happy with any amount of audio equipment. I could I could have a whole studio at my disposal and be like, hey, well, we don't have this one like we don't have a contact mic, so I can't go mic a bridge and get that like organic sound of me thwacking a hammer against the Golden Gate.
Do you do that?
Kind of sometimes.
Kind of sometimes?
I don't go quite that extreme. I know people who do like mic up bridges and like walk across them and capture those sounds and use them in audio productions. Sometimes I will go out with like a handheld field recorder and just like find interesting noises.
Yeah, I do that too.
Oh, that's awesome.
Neat.
Yeah.
Do you make music or like you do sound effects or?
Yeah, I do music in the theater.
Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah. I have it's like a Zoom H5.
Those
It's
are
like a
great.
4-track portable AA battery powered recorder.
Yeah, those are amazing. Do they does yours record onto an SD card also? Yeah. It's so neat.
It's a self-contained version of this.
Which is great. You can record 2 tracks simultaneously, or 4 tracks total, right? Or 4 tracks simultaneously. But 2 mics on it.
It has 2 mics built in, which you can replace with combo jacks, and it has combo jacks also built in for XLR or instrument input.
It's just
Pretty sweet.
amazing.
Technology, man.
Sure.
But to me, you kind of described the techie's plight there too. Like, there's never quite enough equipment. There's always, like, you get to a certain point and it's just like, well, you know, the next thing, if I just had a laser hologram, then I could really get this coffee right.
Yeah.
It's true. Then you don't end up using it. You get all that gear, and then all you needed was like a desk lamp.
Right.
That's what you use. Like,
That's actually probably one of the biggest rules of being a techie and having some interest is you get really involved. You have this preconceived notion that the more things you have, the more creative or productive you'll be, which is like, oh, then you start accumulating things, right? And the way less creative or productive you actually are. So I went through this whole phase where I wanted to create an analog signal chain, right? Because I was like, all my favorite bands from the 80s did it, I'm going to do it, and that's going to be my life. And I went from like writing a whole lot to like collecting a whole lot. And at one point I was repairing a Space Echo like on my desk, and I was like, why am I doing this? I was like, what? Like, and I ended up selling literally a giant room full of just vintage audio gear, and went back to microphone and a little keyboard, and that was it. Yeah.
Because that's all you need. That is, the Space Echo is like a great example too, because I think that was the one that was actually part of the Echo came from a strange fluid in it, like a type of oil that would sometimes run out and then have to be replaced. Like, it's so impractical. It's kind of beautiful how impractical it is in another way, but it's just, you know, it's not used because it's not needed. It's just kind of beautiful.
Yeah.
We're talking about music equipment. Space Echo being an echo delay audio unit.
Right, even as that context. Yeah, chunky. And there's like a few kinds of that. Like another one was a tape delay, right, where it would just be a literal loop of like 60 seconds of cassette tape that people would then record reverb on, and it would degrade in an analog way. And then if people were especially feeling freaky or dangerous, they would like put their thumb on the tape and make it wobble and just, you know.
So that technique, the thumb on the tape, actually goes back to the 60s when the Beatles were recording their albums in Abbey Road. Literally, sometimes they would have 2 tape reels set up, and the engineer, to create that kind of interesting wobble stereo effect, would put his thumb on the tape reel. So it would slow down a little bit, and then it would gradually catch up to the other tape.
That's so crazy.
It's awesome.
I think an audio engineer, their role, or at least their responsibilities, have changed. Right, prior to the digital tools that we have now, they would actually go in and hand splice whole frequencies on tape.
Yeah.
Right? Like they would just they would strip a piece of tape out if they didn't like that particular channel or something, right? And I think it was a lot more hands-on than it is now in some respects. Like voice doubling, somebody realized that if you re-recorded over the voice, like you could voice double. Which was like a huge boon to like audio, to songs of the
Just
time.
increasing the palette.
Yeah. I mean, it's pretty interesting. I think what we've lost and what we've gained. Right?
Yeah, no, definitely, because it used to be the case that being a recording engineer meant you had to understand a lot of very technical things. You almost had to be an electrical engineer as well as an acoustic scientist to really take advantage of all these things. So then, if you were also creative, you got deeply pulled into the process. Like not just with the Beatles, but also with Jimi Hendrix and Roger Mayer, I think his name is, who invented a lot of things that are now used, such as phasing, where you would have a wave, you would shift it just a little bit, so it's out of sync just a bit with the original signal, and you would get a strange sort of doubling effect.
Cool.
So I guess, since people don't need engineers to do that, because there are now effects to do that, there's more creativity in the hands of the actual musicians. Then the trade-off is there's a little less of a really technique-based insanity that could come from a good audio engineer.
But that's what's always separated, I think, sometimes well-produced music from just music, which is the craft that people participate in after the fact, right? Like, I mean, you can make good music, you can write good songs, but I think that's what separates me from the Skrillexes of the world, right? They actually probably do a lot more fine-tuning of the sound in post than me going.
But that can be the fun too.
Yeah.
Speaking of February stuff that's happening right now, February album writing month is going on. I've been participating in that, so a lot of these discussions are fresh in my mind from other folks at the FOM website. So,
what's the FOM website?
So it's FOM.org, and it again stands for February Album Writing Month, and you can log in, and the goal is to write 14 songs in 28 days. And I think the success rate is pretty low, but the point is not really to succeed. The point is to have fun along the way, and like meet interesting people through the internet and hear the music that they're creating and write, and be positive about the whole experience. And it's kind of in contrast to some of the other platforms that I see for musicians that want to share their work, where it's easy for somebody to come along and say like, hey, you're really talented, but this one thing you did there really stinks. And that kind of stuff doesn't happen at FOM, which is really nice. It's like a very inclusive community in that way.
What's the name of your album?
Mine is the Alien album.
That's awesome.
And it's on FOM.org.
It's on FOM.org. It's in kind of process right now. So I think I've got 6 songs written and I want to end up somewhere around 10 or 12. Not all the songs I've written for FOM are related to aliens or space, but.
And what's your name?
Cameron.
Cameron.
You can find me on FOM at Spirulence. That's SPIRULENCE. And if that fails, you can always find me on Bandcamp at hsqp.bandcamp.com.
Cool. What's everybody's name? Let's just go around.
Yeah.
That's Cameron.
Yeah.
I'm James.
Nice to meet you, James. I'm James.
Maybe introduce yourselves and kind of like what you're about.
Oh yeah, let's start again.
Okay, all right. So I'm Cameron. I make music during the day. I also work at a mortgage company doing software engineering for them. And those two kind of sometimes have some unique interplay, and sometimes they're just totally separate.
That's neat. Well, coming to me, I'm James. I write science fiction and fantasy for fun. I also do some electronic music because it's fun too. Sometimes also people are kind of irritated by my electronic music, which is I just kind of find entertaining. Like I don't know, it's just really amusing to me. It's fine. And as a day job, I work as a technical writer for various companies, which is also kind of a nice overlap.
My name is Ignacio. I'm from Colombia and I'm visiting San Francisco, so I'm attending all the meetups and hackathons that I can find. I study computer science, so I'm very into tech. And speaking about the music side, I kind of define myself as an audiophile, so I love like good sound. So looking for those .flag files and just having like an importance for the kilobits per second that you have on these files and just care about it. Yeah, that's it.
Nice to meet you.
Yeah.
Nice to meet you.
I'm Dan, and I'm the world's youngest cryptocurrency trader. No, I'm just kidding. I am Dan, and I'm unapologetically building the future. And yeah, my background's actually in programming, and my education's in electrical engineering and computational chemistry, and just a big old nerd. Comics. I grew up on comics. And my favorite comic book heroes are Iron Man and Batman because they are regular people with capital that decided, not regular people, they were crazy, that decided to build cool stuff and, you know, enabled cool other things.
Did you read the Hellboy series?
I know, but I've seen both movies. Does that count?
No. I'm Jack. I don't know. I'm Jack.
You obviously, it seems like you did read the Hellboy series. It
Yeah.
seems like what you're.
Not really,
No?
actually.
Oh, okay.
I've tried the first book, and I haven't really, I mean, I only got it a few weeks ago, and I just haven't gotten to reading it yet. I was just curious if you did.
Okay, cool. Just curious them too.
Nice.
I'm James. I have a degree in theater and creative writing, so I'm gearing up for a festival that I just found out I got into, San Francisco Fringe, which I was in last year. I got in again, it's lottery. I didn't realize it was so hard to get in, actually. It's like crazy competitive, but I got in for next fall, this September, so that's cool. And also I'm a musician, and I build my own instruments and recording stuff with field recorder.
Oh,
That's really cool.
There's quite a few people who are interested in instrument building and field recording around here, actually. Yeah, it's cool. Comic I really like, Berserk.
Hmm.
You read that?
Is that the anime as well?
Yeah, it's a comic. It's been written for like 20-something years.
Yeah.
By a guy named Kentaro Miura, I think.
so there'll be manga. Is
Yeah.
that right? Okay.
It's awesome. It's really, really gorgeously drawn and great story.
That's really cool.
Recommend it.
So when you're reading that, are you reading it right to left?
Yeah.
Yeah, that was an interesting thing for me to adjust to reading manga, because I would be like, this. Why is this all Quentin Tarantino, like out of sequence? I don't. But so reading it the way that it's intended would be going from right to left, which is something to adjust to.
I think it's a trip, yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's a different experience reading.
It's hard to adjust to. For
Yeah.
sure.
I've tried
For
to do
sure.
it. It drives me crazy. I can't read that stuff if it's right to left.
Well, it'll be weird too, because you'll be, of course, reading right to left, but the word balloons left to right.
Oh.
Well, I
So
wish
the
we
word's
had-
in the balloons.
I
Oh,
wish we
yeah.
had a panel in front of us, because the interesting thing about this, one of them, is that it's so well drawn, because the artist is also extremely good at paneling. So the panels are really clear. It's weird to read right to left, but at the same time, like there'll be perspective shifts, and they happen in a sequence of like 3 small panels opening up to a larger panel. So it's always kind of playing around with the way they're organized together. But if you skip over it, you'll be confused. You know, if you just want to look around anywhere, because you're like, oh, that's a nice panel. But if you look at them in sequence, it makes like total sense. It's very strange.
But yeah, so has there been? It seems like there must have been a resistance to just mirror swapping them, so that there's the same flow, but the panels are going left to right and the words are going left to right.
We we'd have to look at a panel, and it's pretty wild.
No, I know it's wild, but it seems like if you're just ignoring the words and the balloons for a second.
We're on Facebook, and then this software didn't support.
Oh, we're back.
Are we back live?
Well, this has some delay, but
This is to just mirror swapping them. So we got most of it. The panels are going left to right.
and the audio's messed up.
No, I know.
Why is the audio messed up? It's like higher pitch.
I don't know.
There's my
I'm hearing the
voice
same
like
thing
that.
as you're hearing. Test. Hello.
Oh, we probably have a little bit of phasing happening from all the mics
Yeah.
being active at the same time.
Why is the audio messed up? Oh, is it live now?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. It's like higher pitch.
Cool. So I guess we're back on.
Yeah.
I'm hearing the
That
same
works.
thing as you're hearing.
Cool. We were able to pick it back up right where we left.
Power adapter tried to shut us down, but we won't be put down that easily.
Except the audio's still kind of weird, but
Yeah. Wonder if
It's
I can do
alright.
something about
We'll
that.
just say creative. The audio's
That is
creative.
literally just my voice.
Check.
You ready?
oh, check. Yep.
Yeah, we're good. All right, what were we talking about?
I mean, I was just basically talking about the framing of anime, but it seemed like that conversation ran its course.
My favorite comic book that I want to see adapted into something more, and I can't remember what exactly it's called right now, but it's a Marvel comic where they take the same Marvel characters and they bring them back in time to before the American Revolution in the colonies.
Oh,
Huh.
interesting.
Yeah, I think it was called like Marvel 1640 or something like that.
Huh.
Yeah.
There was a time in the '90s where babyfying the comic book characters was a thing, which is bizarre.
Right. It seemed like that was almost trying to do like an appeal to cute.
Like the Muppet
Japan.
Babies of Marvel characters.
But it seemed like maybe tied to manga in some way though, or like
Mm.
kind of like making cute.
Yeah, there were cutesy versions of them, right?
I mean, we do that with like is it Plinko Pop? Is that the right brand now? I walked into GameStop the other day and they had a whole downstairs that was full of like cute anime versions of Captain America and Iron Man and stuff.
Oh, the little like almost like bobblehead dolls.
Yeah.
Yeah.
They've got that in Korea also.
Uh-huh.
Like the paper craft toys and everything, you know, like paper Darth Vader.
Huh.
Yeah, lots of that stuff.
R.I.P. GameStop. They're doing terrible.
Oh, really?
And like if you go into a GameStop, it's just trashed these days. Like some are okay, but like some will be in malls and there'll just be piles of Xbox 360 boxes just all over in the middle of the store, in the middle of the walkways and stuff.
And so they just don't care. It sounds like.
So it's pretty cool that you mentioned GameStop. Or one of the things that I've noticed is arcades are gone, right? Like there's no more arcades. I remember when I was spending back in my day, when you would go to an arcade and that was kind of like that's where you would congregate.
It's a community and social. Yeah.
Razer is actually doing a really good job of bringing that back. Razer stores, there's one in the
Oh, yeah.
Metreon.
I was
where-
there, and
yeah.
a bunch of teenage boys. There was like maybe 40 teenage boys, and they were like all playing World of Warcraft
Yeah.
or whatever.
Yeah, it's crazy. They're bringing
Crazy.
it back. It's like
Question.
the new.
Razer, like the company that makes mice?
Yes. Yeah.
And laptops.
Oh, okay, they make laptops now?
Yeah.
Oh, so it's like so this is a draw for people also to like
Right.
to buy their stuff.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think they have one of those at the Westfield Mall, then, don't they? On Market
Yes.
Street. Yeah.
It seems to be like VR is going, like some VR companies going in that kind of cave. Like,
So yeah, so creating a store not specifically to sell, but more as just a showcase, and just like marketing by association with their product.
I mean, I was talking to somebody like maybe in the States.
Oh wait, introduce yourself to everyone.
I'm Francis, and I'm doing a PhD on Silicon Valley and tech culture, working on an augmented reality app, which is like civic data, housing information,
Super cool.
trying to get the app.
Yeah.
So yeah, no, I was talking to somebody who was vaguely in that kind of VR entertainment space, and they were confident that people would pay enough to make these like viable businesses, so it should be like the Laser Quest of the 21st century kind of
I mean, that is interesting, and I feel like I can see that, but that's interesting. It would be the in real life communal gathering to all go into VR together.
What's your app?
So
What's it called?
Yeah, I don't know if you're close enough to a microphone.
Yeah, we can move a microphone over here. And move here.
Ooh.
yeah, it's called Augmented because it's augmented reality for renters. And it's in the App Store right now, and you probably can't catch through like screenshots and stuff, but basically hold it up and in front of any San Francisco or New York building, and you'll see kind of public records, like ownership,
Really?
and building complaints, planning records and everything like that.
When you say App Store, you mean like iOS and
Yeah.
Android?
Just right now.
So it would show you this. The average rent for this property is
It wouldn't
this.
show you the average rent, but it would show you like, I mean, that's sort of like for some cities there's Zillow data, which is like it's their proprietary metrics. This is more basically, has it got a shitty landlord? So it's like code violations, building permits, planning records. If you walk past a vacant lot and you want to see what they're planning to build on there, you can use it to pull up any records on that.
Well, that sounds super useful, and I wonder if you have a startup with it.
Sort of figuring out where that's going to go. Yeah.
I mean, I could just. That seems like, to me anyway, that seems like the sort of thing that people would throw money at if they could, if they are presented with a certain plan. There'd be things within that, like they'd want you to partner, say, with someone who is a money person or something too. If you don't have that background, I don't know.
Yeah, and the other side of it is using machine learning to actually predict whether you're going to have issues, and there's enough features that's like, what would say, just give the ROC figure, which is 0.938, 0.94.
ROC, return on.
Receiver operating curve.
Okay.
So,
I was thinking return on capital. That's one.
yeah, no, that would be a great return. and that translates to like 98% accurate. So if it says you're not going to have any issues in the next year, 49 times out of 50, that's going to be correct.
I mean, it just sounds to me like if you have that together, you might just like start shopping for someone to do that.
It took some people who are in kind of camera first space like that.
Candid camera?
Kind of the camera first, kind of. So the camera is the new search box.
Sure.
So
Huh.
there's no thesis for a couple of funds, so they are and all this. So you can hold it up and it say, oh, that's such and such a brand of microphone, and then recognize it and show you the Amazon product page and all this stuff. But like kind of stupid.
I'm looking at your website. So does this show, like, we hand it down the street, would it show multiple buildings at the same time?
Yes.
That's really cool.
Yeah.
I'm just looking at it. It says, like, 390 Prospect, 10 violations, 2 units. Well, they won't see it on the camera,
Yeah,
but,
Do you think
but
you
it gives a little pop-up of the property and then, like, different violations and units and things in it, which is pretty interesting. It shows it building by building. You should hold that up in front of the camera.
I was
See it.
I don't know if you're doing this right now, but I was wondering, what it shows up for this building.
It's showing in the room.
We'll see that on the camera.
Yeah, we can see it. Oh, that was awesome.
So I mean, is it?
Hold it a little closer since it's wide. Yeah, there we go. And you can buy whole buildings directly from the app.
With Bitcoin.
Yeah, one Bitcoin.
Why do you have to have a...
Well, hopefully it'll be worth enough.
It says you have to have a newer device. Why is that?
Because it runs on the Apple AR kit, which is
In the new release of iOS.
But it's only for a specific iPhone. So I
Yeah,
think it's
it's-
only for
A9 and above.
Oh, that's right too. So there's a specific chip in the newer iPhone that does AR.
Do you also
Yeah.
need the dual
Really?
camera?
Ish.
I'm not sure it's quite. There's a specific chip for libraries which do the specific AR stuff. Presumably are only compiled for
Certain
that
phones.
generation of processors.
As a way to maybe make people upgrade to that hardware.
I think that honestly, I think the math is hard enough that it would probably not be an acceptable user experience on the other devices. Or, like, it's hard to tell, but I think probably for this it would. I think for the stuff where it's just like a plain geometry.
As opposed to showing like 3D shapes moving in space.
Yeah,
Okay.
I can see why if there's all the kind of crazy, detailed game AR stuff, that probably is not actually going to work that well on them.
Does it also,
There's also camera resolution issues.
so, what do you call this? Scope creep. Could you have it, does it already have it so you can just put in an address? So,
And browse on a Mac. So those features work on the older devices, so that's anything you can run iOS 11 on.
so I am curious then what it says about hackerspace and the, how the landlord is and what the.
Yeah, I'm looking that up right now, and
Are you down at
but it's like not. So I'm looking at 2169 Mission Building.
Yeah.
It says number of units 0.
This is common because it's
Soft
always
story none. No
Yeah.
record found on rent stabilized.
It's not a residential
Last
building.
sale, rent, sale,
Yeah.
estimate. Oh, that's nothing. There's one building complaint.
What's it?
Haphazard electrical work throughout third floor. Complainant believes it constitutes a safety fire hazard. November 26, 2014.
So apparently Noisebridge had this big thing where someone who was a part of the space was asked to no longer be a part of the space, and so they spent a lot of time.
More than one. More
yeah.
than one person.
Yeah.
Oh, you've got it.
Reading complaints about.
Just that. See, that's so perfect in so many ways. Like, I'm sorry to hear that, but of course it's like, what do you mean I'm too difficult to work with? I'll show you. I'm gonna shut it down.
Yeah.
Like, we're obviously seeing the same personality traits.
I can't disagree with haphazard electrical work, though.
I would say it's whole hazard.
Yeah.
There's another one which it was obviously been a violation which isn't actually done. So this is a harder task than you'd think, right? So there's no consistent coding and
Database.
translating between like GeoPoints and the City Enterprise Address Record and Google Maps, and there's these kind of edge cases
Sure.
like South Park with the street, which normally park is a suffix, right? So like
The address.
something park, and it's like it's two elements. And Google Maps, it's South Park Street. In the San Francisco EAS, it's South Park, one string, like the street name and suffix null. And you literally have to write code just to one place. It's
Just go in there and
give
just-
some of the offices that you want to demo to on South Park. You want to make sure it works. Yeah, no, there's all sorts of weirdness like that. Where, like, so what I was looking at was this
This is entertaining.
Right?
Yeah, building complaints, splitting records,
building permit,
permits,
which is-
problems.
There's like a really
This is all still for this building?
Yeah, there's a really recent building permit to change of use for enlargement of workshop space for laser cutter, but this is to comply with a notice of violation, which isn't for some reason showing up.
Which is
That
another one of
should
those
be in the
things
code-
that.
should be in the code violation.
But that was another thing that somebody submitted. I can't remember it doesn't matter who the person is by name, but they basically people submitting complaints about the space in any way they can.
And just to be trolls.
Yeah. And then, trying to ruin things for everyone, basically. But when you make a complaint, when you file a complaint, the thing is, it's like the city's really good about it, They follow up, which is good,
Yeah.
too. But, they take it very seriously. They don't let anything slide. So, just any kind of inference of a problem, and they show up and they're, like, really thorough. But I think, they're pretty nice people and understanding, too. That, like, people would file random charges against us, which sometimes they're not true, and, yeah.
Yeah, so I mean, it does sound like a good case of just due diligence, but also being reasonable.
Yeah.
I mean, this is not a residential building as well.
Correct.
Makes your life probably a lot easier, mostly.
Yeah. No sleeping.
This is 98% rate
Yeah.
of success. But it's like far from the real price.
Or does it do
So
pricing?
This is saying, are you going to have a code violation in the coming 12 months?
Oh, okay.
So training the model random forest scikit-learn on like the historic data set, and then cutting it off at like 1st January 2016. Then doing the test split, so you use 2017 as like the test segment.
Okay.
So
To A/B test it.
no. So, what's the correct? Dan probably knows machine learning.
Which one?
But, so, basically using a and I'm just blanking on the
Control?
essentially. So it's like the 5 years up, 5 years from like 2011 to 2016, and then you try and predict 2017. So it's split into test and train sets in that way, and based on that, so you can kind of say, would this model, if we'd run it on the 1st of January 2017, accurately predicted what happened in 2017, and the outcome of that would be 98% effective.
So it's intended as a way to see the basic context and possibly avoid or at least be aware of pitfalls, and less about the actual pricing of the building.
Yeah. So should that factor into things like pricing insurance policies and mortgage lending to commercial buildings? Probably, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it might be something that, mortgage companies and even, Zillow occurs to me as someone that might be very interested in this.
The CMEs, it's Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac.
I was doing
Collateralized debt obligations. So basically saying, is this like a low risk or a high risk loan?
I was doing a very similar project with more oriented around the price, lend price and sell price.
I understand.
So I'm from Colombia, and I was doing this project that I would scrape the Colombian Zillow version of the data that they had. So every 6 hours I had a cron job that would go online and scrape all the data. And the main objective will be, with that data, like predict every single new post, how far apart from the actual property, right? So I did this whole analysis. I still have it running for the last 2 months. I have around 170,000 properties, which are mostly in the capital of Colombia. And then I run the model, and most people told like the biggest parameters they want to see will be the age of the property, because it makes sense if you want to live in a new apartment. And I mean, the usual thing, the latitude and the location around the city to see which schools and all of that. But there was a big surprise that all of those matter, but not the age of the building.
That doesn't surprise me at all. So having done this similar, like that's definitely one of the features in the model I'm using, and it's not that significant.
Yeah.
What could, like, if you look at the landlords of New York, you see who the actual landlord is, and you can just do more or less fuzzy matching to basically identify the whole property. You can sum all the code violations over any given period. That's the biggest predictor, like by a mile. This is a business practices thing. It's not, you have a 100-year-old building that's perfectly maintained and a 10-year-old one that's falling apart already. So, no, it doesn't surprise me.
Okay.
That makes a lot of sense to me too, because I'm recalling when I was living in New York, one time I opened the Village Voice and I saw my landlord in the list of the 10 worst landlords in New York. And he was just terrible to deal with, and I could see that being an issue, both in someone just living there, but also just buying the property. Like, this is someone who, if you're aware of that, you're now aware of, he could just be passing along a whole bunch of problems he's just not telling me.
And the thing is that you would think when you apply for a mortgage to buy a building as a landlord, that they would ask you what you've got up.
What's going on? Yeah, yeah.
That data isn't in the kind of lending.
It's not in any sort of like available system. Like I know someone else who is a good person, so it worked out well. But he went to buy a building, and his credit was awful. Like he just went through a bankruptcy. So he talked with his friends, and they literally changed the date on a credit report from several years before and just submitted that and got this property. So there's not a lot of checking. And, you know, there should be. That worked out well, and that was also a private sale from person to person, but it was still, you know, iffy and worth avoiding.
Yeah.
So one of the things that this is kind of a departure from talking about buildings and things like that, that I definitely wanted to talk on the show about was one of my big things is I want to put all research scientists out of business. And I know that's a huge phrase and it scares a lot of people, but I think at least speaking to building a corpus of knowledge around experimentation is really important, especially one that doesn't include human bias, right? As well as creating research and outcomes that are reproducible, right? So one of the things that I have been focusing on lately is thinking about how to create proof of reproducibility as well as proof of insight, which is kind of a mechanic that allows people to it facilitates kind of exploration, but also facilitates the ability to find things that are close to the truth as possible, which is a pretty interesting mechanic that I don't think really exists in science right now, because you have people that who do research and they put their research out there, but everyone's so kind of inundated with their own research that they don't prove that the research actually has happened. So you have like a bunch of these studies where data is fabricated or smudged or whatever in order to or fudged in order to approach the outcome at which the scientists would like, you know, their research to be, right? Whether that's because the research is funded by a particular type of company or whatever, right? So like, how do we facilitate, you know, reproducibility as well as like fact finding among many people? I think needs to happen in a phased approach, but also will eventually happen with autonomous laboratories.
So, I mean, there's a lot in that that's very interesting to me, but I guess I'll ask first. It seems that this is coming from a point of view that current peer review is not sufficient or is missing some needs. Okay.
It is for, I think, easier stuff where it doesn't require any experimentation. So like peer review on like theoretical stuff, you know, especially mathematics or computer science is really easy. But I think peer review on like hard science is very difficult.
So is there a specific example of...
Not off the top of my head.
Okay, just curious.
I'm just thinking of the distinction between peer review and reproduction.
Yeah.
So it seems that it's definitely true that doing reproducibility on hard science is significantly more challenging than CS.
Yeah.
But if it's just sort of the level of peer review, like pre-publication,
right,
your colleagues reading your work to see if it
matches,
then that seems to be like slightly different.
Right, and this is has to do with the outcome of the experiment itself.
Okay.
The entire chain, right? Is it reproducible? And if it is reproducible by third parties, then it is in fact hard science. It is in fact a representation of reality, right?
So I mean, I find all of that very interesting. Maybe I just have Stardust in my mind, and maybe this already exists. But what about just a verified platform for people to follow the experiment chain through, so they can't fudge anything?
Yeah, I guess the problem is, you know, I think once you have a system that so my problem are humans, right?
Sure.
So essentially, like once you're able to introduce any human influence into this, I think it's prone to you know, the problems of fudging or yeah, I think that's the big one, right? It's just like it's prone to error.
So yeah.
Well, my thought on this is, do you have to put all research scientists out of business to accomplish that goal?
No, but it's a very impactful statement.
Okay, all right.
Yeah.
That makes sense to me.
So you would like to set it up so that there does not need to be research scientists?
I think that their jobs will solution, maybe. But ultimately, like that job will move further and further away from the actual
Current.
proving that science.
So when you say autonomous laboratory, what do you mean?
Just like a self-contained lab, right? One that you can require some inputs, conducts the experiments, comes to some conclusion, right? Make some observation. Eventually, I would like it to make some observation.
Sure.
Test an hypothesis scientifically, and come to some conclusion that can be verified by other laboratories, right?
And so this would be, if humans aren't involved, this would be an AI run, or let's say machine run.
Totally.
Yeah.
Yes, that sense of autonomous, not the kind of political, economic sense of independent from the university means autonomous.
Right. Exactly.
But machine directed.
Correct.
Yeah.
And eventually, like, I think all of capturing and cataloging and retrieving that knowledge will be done autonomously.
So would it be fair to say that this is referring more to the observation and evidence side than the analysis side?
I think it can be both, right? Like observation and evidence, is the part of the proof of reproducibility, but the proof of insight is where we get to the analysis side.
So you say proof of insight. Like,
Right.
Can you go into that a bit
Yeah,
more?
I mean, I just came up with that phrase literally on Wednesday, and started writing in my journal. I had a meeting with somebody who's building space robots, right? And for our platform, like we're looking to connect all these different things and basically build an autonomous control system, which becomes global logistics and supply chains and whatever. But they're building robots, right, which will use human-in-the-loop training.
I know who this was.
What's that?
Somebody
Yeah,
from our
yeah,
panel,
yeah,
wasn't it?
yeah.
Glad you guys connected.
Yeah. And they eventually want these robots to learn these tasks and then use inference to create, and optimize in new contexts and new domains. But ultimately, they want to end up in space, right? Like, it's a hot topic, but it makes a lot of sense. So we were talking about this, and one of the things that you need in order to I guess, facilitate this progression is, this AI chain, right? How do you create truth, and then how do you leverage that truth in order to build new economies and understand the world, right? Maybe we got up a little off topic there.
Sure, but how do you extend it? So connecting with proof of insight.
Right. Proof of insight is basically, we were talking about proof of work and basic science and math and logic and truth. And proof of insight would be if you're able to correlate some data, right? If you autonomously, right? If you're able to find some truth within the data, and it can be verified by other parties in a consensus, then that's like proof of insight, right? Then you get rewarded for proving something is true, right? And so I think that's an incentive to find more truth.
Sure.
Why is that not an adverse selection pressure?
What's that?
Why is that not an adverse selection pressure?
What do you
in
mean
the
by
sense of bias? So, if there's a high, I think you should at the very least pay people the same for disproving things. Probably it being science, you should pay people substantially more for disproving hypotheses.
Right. So part of the consensus is actually people proving that the opposite is not true.
Rejecting null.
Yeah. So that's part of the consensus process, right? In order to prove something is true, you also have to prove that the inverse is not.
So, okay, so that would be, proof of insight would mean proof that the insight was correct.
Right.
Okay. So that's interesting. So then,
which goes back to why we need autonomous laboratories and analysis and things like that.
because they can be presumably less swayed by bias.
Right.
Right.
And less willing or wanting to participate. And this is what's great about the consensus protocol is you're not just proving things right, but you're also proving things wrong and getting rewarded
For that too.
And so that's why I think taking human incentive out of the loop is necessary, right?
So, I mean, that all sounds interesting to me. I could present a counter
Yeah,
case.
absolutely.
Okay.
100%.
Sure. All right,
Yeah.
great. So one of the neat things about science is when something is discovered that has no relation to the original intention at all. It's just, one example would be Viagra, which was originally created as a blood pressure medication, but then ended up being much more useful with this side effect of, helping people get boners, which is nice. It's nice, So that would be a relative failure as a proof of insight for helping blood pressure, because it really didn't do a lot for that. But it would end up being quite a success with this other method.
Part of the system actually, beyond the consensus protocol, is just part of this new system, right? Where we have people who are exploring, who are making observations, or trying to correlate data, or like explore in new and interesting ways. Like, okay, well, if I'm performing pattern matching and this, factor can affect this site, then this also looks like something, right? And so it also needs to reward people for experimenting. So, like, I think original insights are really amazing, and but how do you come up with something to compensate people for things that are seemingly almost orthogonal to their original intent, right? Which might be another parameter of mechanic, right? How different is the application, and how valuable is it ultimately, right? And maybe that ends up being like part of the end result or IP that results from these things.
Yeah, so I actually have a better example. And I think this fits with that too, but it's also interesting. It was the discovery of penicillin, which was entirely accidental, which comes from someone having petri dishes that they left out after a test that grew mold, and looking at them realized that the mold was killing the bacteria. So that's effectively an accidental discovery. How might that be rewarded in this system? Something like that.
Proof of reproducibility, and then proof of the insight, right? So humans can also still participate. I'm not saying humans can't. I'm just saying it's better if they don't, right? I mean, we can if we had autonomous laboratories, or that's lucky, right? How do you account for luck?
Yeah.
Right. So I think that's hard, but not to say that humans can't, participate in the network. It's just there's probably less luck in the world than that, right?
Or maybe at this stage of scientific discovery too, or a lot of the things that people can easily figure out in their immediate environment have been figured out. So we're past the stage where a genuinely great inventor like Benjamin Franklin could invent things in his immediate vicinity.
Yeah.
Like there's still some things he came up with which are very neat, which are uniquely him. Like one is it's called a glass organ. If you've ever seen the glass harmonica, which is a very neat idea, or say bifocals, right? Which is basically splitting reading glasses and far sight glasses in half and putting them in the same thing. Like that's a unique idea. But the discovery of electricity as a force and some work towards that is not a force like that. Most of the forces like that one person could accidentally discover appear to have been discovered by now.
But see, I don't think that what you're talking about is invention or innovation or discovery, and I don't necessarily think that happens. I think it's an iterative process, right? And I would say that there are a lot of discoveries that happen by accident and by random. But if you're able to create systems that can participate in that kind of random discovery, like it might be cooler.
So
I'd say so. I thought those were perhaps not the best example.
Sure.
Frankly, maybe not the best because they're not apparatus. They're not experimental apparatus. And having a kind of history and philosophy of science background a little, I was thinking of things like the vacuum pump with Boyle in the 17th century.
Well, I would
something like the cloud chamber, so the chambers that you use for detecting particle paths, which are like mid-late 20th century invention. And these are what the guy Hans-Jörg Reinberger calls machines for making the future. So the future direction of what research on particle decay you can do is shaped by by this non-human actor in this network, which is the cloud chamber. And this idea of autonomous laboratories, this seems to be kind of taking this idea that science proceeds sort of through this network of human researchers and non-human apparatus, and taking that to like one logical conclusion. And my sort of question with this is about apparatus. Mm-hmm. So when you have like a new detector or whatever, this enables a new kind of science, essentially. Yeah. So how this sort of reward system for insight, often what's really significant about like somebody's whole career is not that they discover so much the theory that's going on behind what's happening, they discover how to observe it, how to trace it. So what's
so for consideration, right? For consideration, this is very much in here. How do we devise an experiment, right? How do we make an observation, right? How do we improve an experiment, right? And then from there, how do we infer, deduce, and create the knowledge representation of the result of that experiment? I think those are huge things, right? But going back, and ultimately, it leads to this big question that I have: is how do we propose a question? Like, what is that even? If I were going out and trying to pursue science or pursue the truth, like, how do I begin? Right? Is it just like the scientific method where I make an observation and then I have a hypothesis and then I test that? Right? Is that how science should, I guess, progress? But going back to what you're saying is, how do we make an observation? I guess, right? Like,
well, so getting back a little bit to Benjamin Franklin, that was intended as an example of someone who is discovering things without an apparatus, as a counterexample. So within that too, like his use of his exploration of electricity was something that sort of discovery is not something that people can do right now without apparatuses, let's say apparati, because most of the things that people can discover by themselves have been discovered by now. More, tools, more extensive tools are now needed to discover more truths. Was the point of that? But so moving with that to what was the question? What was the latest question?
How do we ask a question?
How do we ask? Improve an experiment.
I wasn't clear what the question was.
I mean, it started off as of how do we, in this system, I guess, incentivize and kind of codify the creation of new experimental systems, apparatus. Yeah.
And then, like, once you make an observation, how do you build a tool to improve that experiment, right? How do you converge on, converging is so weird because how do you converge on more questions?
Then what is a fact?
Okay.
Specific fact, right.
So yeah, thanks. So that gets us back to the generation of questions, right? And it seems that there's two ways. There's two angles, and I don't know if one is better than the other, but one is I have a theory, and let me test it with evidence.
Right.
And the other is, let me amass a bunch of evidence, and then you look at the evidence and like, what is interesting about this evidence? Like, what patterns emerge from the evidence?
Like deduction versus induction.
Exactly that. So it seems that both of those are useful. I would say that inductive seems like it can produce leaps more often than deductive.
Yeah. But I think if you start with a question, it's inherently looking for answers. But if you start with answers, I think it's more interesting to create the questions.
That might fit the answers, sure.
Right. Yeah. Because you're making an observation of truth instead of having that implicit bias of already assuming, right? There's already assumptions there, right? Yeah. So anyway, this is what I think about it.
It's pretty cool. I'm curious how this would work for the soft sciences.
Yeah.
Because it seems like we have a pretty, some consensus around the table about how it would work for chemistry or for physics or math.
That's a big thing, right? It's like you have to think about the plausibility of the truth relative to time and space, right? The truth in hard science is pretty reliably.
Relatively stable at most of the levels of detail we're talking about it.
And I think that that's easier to confirm and reliably retrieve over time. But I think the soft sciences, and you're talking about like sociology.
Yeah, sociology,
And psychology.
Yeah, and I shouldn't call them soft sciences. I should call them social sciences.
Yeah.
But yes.
And I think that's a harder question, and I think one that I was actually thinking about this on the way out here. Funny enough, you should mention that. One that I think is almost like you have to understand the instructions of the system that these things participate in to understand the breadth and depth by which these things can evolve. Right? So if you understand the system itself, you understand the limitations of those soft things. Right? And then you can say, within this system, this is how this could possibly evolve. But I think you need to understand the instructions of the system first to understand the capacity of that system to facilitate these soft things.
Okay. And I guess the reason why I asked this question is because it seems to me that those problems might actually be easier to solve with our current technology than the hard science questions.
Yeah, but it goes back to, like, is this going to be true forever? Right?
No, and I don't think that matters.
You might be trying to extract larger truths from it, such as like
let's say that maybe take the game of life as a really simple example. What if you take the game of life and you add on specific constraints like what happens if you assign random colors to these dots and colors don't like being next to dots of other colors and stuff like this, and that can model some of the forces that we see in real life. And if you start autonomously building those systems from the ground up with the instructions that you're mentioning, can we could I build an autonomous social science laboratory?
100%.
Yeah.
It's called biomimetics. I mean, that's essentially what we do. We have scientists that go out and look at hard science and look at how systems work, and then we have mathematicians that model those systems, right? And then you have other practitioners who leverage those models, right, to reproduce what happens in nature and try to like pattern match and see where that actually exists in culture and other things, right? And so I think that yes, once you understand the world in which those things can live in, you can definitely model what we see in real life.
So how far do we get if we have an incomplete understanding of the world?
So that's difficult, right? Because we think. So somebody asked me, well, aren't you afraid that AI, is going to end mankind? But I think that ultimately what happens is you need to have a provable understanding of the universe to make any decision, which is a hard thing.
So I mean, there's a couple of different things within that, right? Like there has, knowledge can never be complete, right?
Can it?
Cannot.
Why not?
If you're familiar with Gödel's incompleteness theorem.
Yeah. Okay. Right.
Also, he isn't done.
Right. So besides that, it seems so we have gotten as far as we have as a species by dealing with imperfect knowledge in practical ways, and this is part of the reasons why we have superstitions to a certain extent, because the example given is we're primates in the jungle, we're looking out at a sea of grass, there's grass that's moving over there. If it's moving 9 times and we think it's a lion and we're wrong, we live. But the one time that it's a lion, we avoid that. So we can believe something that's wrong and out of step with evidence more often than not, as long as we're avoiding the worst outcome of being wrong.
I mean, it's kind of like how alchemy eventually evolved into chemistry.
Exactly. Sure.
Right.
What's alchemy?
Alchemy is chemistry for dumb people.
That's really.
I'm just kidding. No, alchemy was this idea before you had these
It was pre-scientific,
Yeah.
proto-scientific.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. And I'm sorry, I did not mean to offend any alchemists.
The Full Metal Alchemists have our respect.
I apologize. Card carrying alchemists out there. Check out chemistry, you might like it.
It's like for from say 1500, 1600 is like the kind of
And
high
I can call
period.
those people dumb because they're dead. You know,
but these people, like John Dee is smarter than Newton.
yeah.
John Dee is
Just
like,
a genius,
incredible
just
genius.
wrong. But he had no way of knowing how wrong he was.
He's
Right.
wrong, but I mean, there's this sort of huge, like, cultural,
Yeah.
esoteric. It's sort of this weird amalgam of kind of self-improvement, and is what they're doing kind of a metaphor for like self-improvement and spiritual work, or do they
Right,
really
very-
believe that this
a
is
lot of
chemistry? And then it's sort of, and it's with Roger Bacon and then Francis Bacon, like 300 years later, you start to get this sort of separation from alchemy, and the scientific method comes out of alchemy.
Yeah.
So I mean, Bacon
Right.
comes from this background. So it's all the smartest people of the day are doing it. They're wrong,
Right.
but it's not that there are some smart people who are going, these alchemists are crazy.
Right.
There's atoms,
I-
yeah.
Right. So I was gonna say in terms of paradigms, and like a really sort of good example, and it's surprisingly late. It's the turn of the like 19th century. So it's around like French Revolution, American Revolution. It's Lavoisier and oxygen and
yeah.
phlogiston. So my sort of meta longue durée like grand narrative question is what happens when you get a paradigm shift in this.
But yeah, and
So when everybody who was the smartest scientist of their age is proceeding according to one paradigm, and then we realize this was not quite right or was completely wrong, and it wasn't that they were dumb, and everybody who came after them
Yeah.
isn't smarter. But how do we sort of process this kind of thing
Right.
in this sort of very
And when I made that statement, it was very tongue in cheek. It wasn't, you know. I mean,
I don't think they're offended. I don't think they learned how to live forever. If they did discover the philosopher's stone and they lived, I think that they should come onto the podcast.
No, but this question of being wrong.
being still on the
Still being smart, sure. And you know, the phlogiston was an interesting example because it's a way of looking at what's going on, which is less wrong. It's still not right,
in the ether.
but yeah, it's getting a little closer to what's being observed, which goes back to where this conversation was branching from.
well, but it also goes back to why did they insist on going down this wrong path, right? And a lot of it was because of you know, royal
Funding,
members,
yeah, patronage.
politically.
Sure.
And then they had some people who 100% presented real science and real insight, and were literally just laughed at, right? Like, obviously, this isn't the in vogue kind of you know, thought of the day, therefore it must be wrong.
This must be wrong. A good
percent of Newton's extant works on alchemy.
sure,
I
which are interesting and wrong. Like an interesting example
Well,
of.
you broke that down to me. The gravity, dude.
Anybody who's like,
Now
no,
I
they can't
understand.
mean that Newton.
Well, another example from the same period that's interesting is people who observed meteorites landing, and were told that they were wrong because there can only be it has to be strictly ordered. Like, there's big planets. There wouldn't be small little rocks flying around. That doesn't make sense. You're obviously deranged, sir. Your evidence must not be true. You must be wrong.
They're attached to interlocking crystal spheres.
Yeah. How could that? Come on now. You're saying the sky is breaking? We're not here for this negativity.
Right.
So.
Yeah, it is interesting, and I think it's even more reason to take humans out of the loop, in my opinion.
Well, so I think that maybe
Because let's be honest, politics and bureaucracy still play a role in science today.
Well, because of course, because it's coming from human society. But so I think the reason for this bringing up of the past flaws gradually improving in imperfect knowledge is basically first that there is no perfect knowledge. Like, it's not actually possible. But you know, you could say, I think with validity, that the closer you get to perfect knowledge, the better you are, the better off you are. But it's not necessarily the case that something is useful to the extent that it's in step with knowledge. there's many cases of beliefs that are actually very useful, even though they're wrong. I mean, not very many. There's a few, but they're important ones, right? So I would say, as a counterexample, like it is important to beware of that. Like there are some beliefs that are useful, even though they are out of step with evidence.
But they're only useful and participated in, I guess, out of either ritual, romantic, or cultural kind of ideas. But beyond that, once you move past it and go, oh, the reason why I was doing this thing is because of this, and in reality, I get 100% return participating in this thing versus like the 80%, right? Like that I get investing in this ritual. And I think that, to me, finding the truth and participating in the truth makes more sense than participating in the ritual.
I can agree with that in most cases, but of course I'm not only referring to ritual, but so I was looking at you because the sort of distinction between hard science and social science that you are making might be an appropriate place here. Like, because one thing that is a not true belief that is useful is
Tell me one of these.
Women loving each of their children and thinking that they're the best child in the world.
That's not true.
No, but it's very useful.
Why is that useful?
Because that helps each child grow up with the most nurturing and loving environment they can. Because their parents are not objective about them.
Right.
So it's not like the parent is wrong either. Like, we can't say they're wrong subjectively.
But I think that exists like culturally as a thing. But there are people that live inside of the reality where it's not that reality, right?
Well, there are children who grow up in terrible environments,
right,
whose parents, like, you know, either don't care, which has been biologically proven to just be awful, just physically even for children, but also parents who have the opposite take, like their child is the worst piece of shit in the world, which is not only tragic, but also just not good for the child, not good for society. It's not useful.
So why is it useful to have the notion, but still not have it reflected in reality?
Well, because it gives that child the best chance that they can get. So that makes it useful, not just for the child, but also for the larger context in the society.
I very much, I don't think that's true. I think it's a local maximum trend.
Yeah.
Okay, please go into the local maximum.
I think if that was literally true and everybody was competing for resources in a way which accurately reflected their belief in the superiority.
Noisebridge is shutting down. Donate now or else we're gone.
All right then. That was great.
That's obviously going to lead to the extinction of cooperative behaviors.
I don't see how that necessarily follows, but let me also say that that's assuming that we're in a situation where people are only competitive. And in fact, you know, the range of human interaction is collaborative and competitive, right? So if someone grows up thinking that they're the best, that doesn't automatically mean that they also think everyone else is beneath them or everyone else is less valid than them.
So it does.
It doesn't, because it's a human emotion, right? So it's not a logic necessarily.
Yeah.
I can think that I'm really good and also not think that I should hurt other people. Like both of those, or I can even think that I'm the best and not think that I should hurt other people, because part of my definition of being the best can also mean that I pride myself on being empathic.
I mean, it's that sort of trolley problem scenario where what you're saying is any mother would always send trolley down the line who didn't have their kid on it at whatever cost.
Yes.
That's not.
But that is.
So that's not globally advantageous.
I would say that it's not necessarily, but I would say that, you know, that being an extreme edge case of that behavior, it is still more advantageous than it is not. Because this, you know, a child is the future. Presuming that all the other people are, you know, there's lots of edge cases within that. Everyone else is not a child.
I think this is more culturally defined than many Americans are culturally.
I mean,
I would argue the opposite in this case. Like, I would say, like, having the adage or having the notion is great, but understanding the reality and supporting the reality to actually give potential to the children that, I don't know, grow up with shitty households, right? Might be better off than, like, keeping on supporting this notion that's not true.
there are specific ways to definitely improve the situation, I'm sure, where, basically, having a society where everyone has a simple baseline of decent treatment, right? But that also wouldn't mean reducing the better treatment. That doesn't benefit. We want to lift all up to a higher level of benefit. But the main point in that, as an example, is that's a belief that a lot of people have that is not true, but that is useful. Like, taking it down from the extreme for a second.
I would like another example as well.
I think I have, and maybe this is a good example, or maybe
In
not.
my mind, it sounds like it's much better to participate in the lie than the truth.
Not always, but sometimes. And this is this would be another way of saying it too. Most parents think their child is above average. Yes, exactly. And
What was it?
It's a reference to like Woebegone days, the
Yeah, right.
now ex Garrison Keillor.
Right,
show
with
was
the-
where everybody, all the kids were above average.
yeah, so within that, like, if all children are treated as if they are above average, the average is likely to be higher, even if most children are still below it, or half the children are still below it. So where that fits in is too, that is maybe a subset, or just that is maybe an area of things that can be worth treating somewhat differently than hard sciences, because you're getting into humans. Humans are incredibly complex. Every human is a universe, and humans are the one part of the observable world that has an ability to influence itself, whether or not it takes it. Of course, we can get into free will versus predestination, but presuming that people have free will, which I think is basically the most pragmatic outlook to have, then humans having free will, it's good to treat humans in a way that does not treat humans in a way that does not induce limits on them, even if that means having humans believe some things that are provably wrong about humans.
Right. Because, like, they may discover penicillin.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, just the opportunity and desire to participate is much more valuable than a wrong outcome, right? Or a bad outcome.
Yeah. It produces a better outcome.
Right. The possibility, the potential is greater having more people to participate than not.
Right. And having more people fully participating and in useful ways.
Right. Interesting. All right. Well, what else is next? I think that was an awesome talk. I really like that.
Sort of fun.
Let me go into my bookmarks and see. I did bookmark a few things.
Like,
I did post something on the meetup that I thought was interesting. I forget exactly what it was, but it was a Bitcoin conspiracy theory.
Well, it was a thread. It was mostly like I interpret the whole thing as a comedy thing.
It's kind of a joke, but it was pretty
is
fun.
the NSA one?
What was it?
You can.
No, it was. Well, in the end, you just can start reading the whole thread. And you're like, okay, I didn't know this, and then you get to a point where, okay, this is definitely not true. This is just a comedy thing.
Yeah.
And the final tweet is just about the crash of the Bitcoin in the last few weeks.
I read this.
There's been about a guy that was mining Bitcoins in Europe, and he's playing a game.
Started with GoldenEye, the game, which I thought was a nice touch.
So that's why the whole.
Oh no, yeah, I know this one. Yeah, and Naval retweeted it at one point, didn't he?
Yeah.
What if? I mean, I don't think it's possible because you could easily look into the code of Bitcoin. But what if, in a twist, just hypothetically, Satoshi Nakamoto put in a back door, so he could, like, I don't know, he could slowly leech Bitcoins once it got to a desired price, or he's like a terrorist or something, and once everybody got
Gets on that.
reliant on Bitcoin, you could just steal everyone's Bitcoin.
I think that's a great premise for a movie. Like that's how it started out, and then Bitcoin is worth so much, and now they have so much in a wallet. They're like figuring out, well, I don't want to destroy everything. I'm literally the 1% now. Like I need to like secure, the wealth that I've created. It's kind of like almost like who's the guy that did Borat?
Sacha Baron Cohen.
I feel like it should be called Satoshi Nakamoto, and it would be like, I don't know, I'd watch this shit out of it.
Well, you know where that takes me is actually, of course, I think it's not quite the same name, but it was Nakatomi Plaza from the great Die Hard.
Yeah.
So there was the fourth Die Hard, I think it was.
Oh.
Yeah.
Oh, wait, is that Live Free or Die?
Yeah. No, I don't. Is that one? Is that one? So.
Our resident Die Hard expert.
Yeah.
Yep, exactly.
Well, I think he's aware of it, like he's aware of disasters in media.
Yeah.
But so there, someone crashes. It could have been such a much more interesting movie than it was. Someone crashes the world's financial system. So you could have a Die Hard where someone is just like, a few years in the future, everything's based on Bitcoin, and someone is just can emerge and just hold it for ransom, right? And so if he just cashed it out, then people would everything would grind to a halt, and then people would figure it out another way.
Right.
But how does Satoshi? Oh, sorry.
But so
Satoshi. Just sorry, this is kind of off. But how does Satoshi like? Okay, I don't know.
Well, let me just finish the setup.
Oh, yeah.
Okay, great. So he could just ruin it, and then people rebuild, and it sucks. They go back to regular currency. Things suck for like a few months, maybe a year. But instead he says, look, I could ruin everything unless you guys give me Australia.
Right. And that's what like somebody will pitch, which makes a lot of sense. And then Hollywood would say, but what if Satoshi Nakamoto could teleport through the blockchain? And like because it's everywhere, and people were like, "What are you talking about?" Like,
but then the writer just literally has to just go like, "Oh, okay, yeah, that sounds like a great idea.
Yeah,
That's the only way to get this funded, right? I love it."
Right.
But so Satoshi, I've looked up his Bitcoin address. I can't find it on the thing. I don't know. I'm sure it's there, but they say he has like 1 million Bitcoins, but I don't know where it is. But I can't find them. But
Can you track chunks of Bitcoins like that?
Oh, yeah.
Oh, interesting.
But I can even track Ethereum or something. Like if I get someone's Ethereum address, like Dan, I borrowed some Ethereum from Dan, and I was sending it back to him, and he gave me his, and then I could look in and see exactly all the stats and how much Ethereum he had and how much he sent. And how
Does he watch this podcast at all? Does he?
Yeah, it's me.
Oh, I thought you said Dad. Okay.
No, Dan.
Okay, all right.
So, but okay, not related. But so if Satoshi has 1 million Bitcoins, how is he gonna get rid of those? I mean, where does he sell them without compromising his identity?
I'll tell you where. He's going to connect with Bruce Willis.
I was gonna say, you help me cash out these coins now.
And the CIA's after him. European.
I'm retired.
I'm too old for this cryptocurrency shit.
But seriously, like, how is he gonna? I mean, everybody's like, oh, Satoshi's a billionaire. Is he though? Can he really get his wealth out?
So it's OTC. There are some firms that specialize in converting crypto into fiat, and they exist in pretty much every country. You can also do local Bitcoin, which means you can meet up for somebody and get stabbed for your Bitcoin.
He's gonna have to meet up with 1 million people.
No, but he can sell it in one massive transaction, right? It might be.
I was working in an API client for a cryptocurrency exchange, so I know the basics of how the orders work. So in a basic exchange, you see, much like Wall Street, you see buy orders and sell orders, like ask or bid, right? So you see all these, I mean, the actual price of Bitcoins in an exchange is where the bid and the ask orders just met, right? So there's a small batch in between, and that's the price, because the average between the average buy order and the average sell order, right? So if you want to sell, let's say, a big amount of Bitcoin, like you have an account with 5% of all the Bitcoin, you want to go and sell those. So you will be offering a big amount of Bitcoins that will satisfy all the orders, all the buying orders, right? So You could do that in a small time, but in the long term, you will destroy the market because you will be like, you will move the actual price. So you will end up to a point that there are so many Bitcoins in the market, and all the buy orders are being satisfied. So the actual prices go down. So you could do that with I mean, easily to get like $1 billion, yeah. But in the long term,
You would lose out on
you'll
some
lose
of your
a
money.
big amount of money. But you can sell, you can make a big fortune just like selling a big amount in the beginning.
This is kind of an argument for why VC firms that invest in ICOs at like a large scale don't actually have liquidity. If you bought 5% of the token of any token, you just can't sell them into the market like that.
And what's interesting is to think about, like, you don't necessarily have to move Bitcoin out of a wallet to sell the wallet, right? What you can, so you can sign a message to prove that you have, that you are this person, right? And so I can use that wallet in a physical transaction, right? And I can say, I am the owner of this wallet. Here's the private key. Give me that money, and it never has to leave that wallet, right? So you don't have to do exchanges. You don't have to sell across exchanges like that, right? It's interesting. I just thought of that, like, maybe that's a reality. Maybe they've already sold off all of their things, and no one wanted to move it out of that wallet yet, right? I mean, it could have transferred across multiple parties already, right? And so, I don't know, is that a reality? Could that exist?
I actually got lost in the middle of the question, so.
Well, you can prove that you own a public key, right, by signing something with your private key. You can sign a message with your private key, and somebody can decrypt it with your public key, which is your known address, right? And so you could prove that you own a wallet by doing that.
And you could prove how much you have in it?
Right.
Okay.
They could see it. They
Okay.
could observe how much.
Yeah, it depends on the blockchain, but in Bitcoin blockchain or Ethereum blockchain, it's all public, so you can see.
So technically, what you can do is you can put the private key with a third party, trusted third party, and the reference to that private key could be sold physically, right? And so as long as you never actually, I guess, require the private key, but you have ownership of that third party's ability to release the private key, then you essentially own a pointer to that cache.
So,
Beating the entire point of cryptocurrencies.
But defeating people's knowledge that it's actually moving.
so it seems like it would be analogous to selling someone the login and password to a bank account.
Right.
Okay.
Which is great if you don't want to be tracked.
Which they could never change afterwards.
But it always maintains the value and
That's
correlated
why,
to the
yeah.
market, right? So it's like Bitcoin is public.
Also, where does Satoshi keep that Bitcoin? I mean,
In a sock drawer.
in the stuff. But I mean, how could you can't even have. I mean, you couldn't keep that much on a ledger. Does he have like 10,000 ledgers?
Well, I mean, it's probably pre-ledger, right?
That's not how it
Yeah,
works.
that's not how
No,
it's
it's
That's
only
not
one
how.
ledger.
But how would you keep all?
You can
of
keep
it?
it on
keep
one
an
ledger.
infinite number of Bitcoin or 21. You could theoretically keep all the coins, and indeed, I think the SIN token, they're all in one wallet now, aren't they?
Yeah.
So you can literally, when you make a new token, when you're the Genesis guy, you literally have all of them. If you pre-mine, you've got 1 billion SIN.
Yep.
Then
So, yeah.
literally there's one wallet which has got 0.001 SIN for some reason,
Yeah.
and then all the rest of
Because I
it
was
another
testing
one.
the wallet contract.
So yeah, the ledger doesn't increase in file size depending on, not significantly, depending on how many coins are in it.
Only with the transaction.
Well, it's not. Yeah, it's not really about the coins being in it.
Right.
It's that's the nature of the blockchain. So, Jack, it's not about having 1 million coins like in the device. It's just that the device allows you to make the transactions. It like adds a level of security supposedly, and being able to replace the device. But you can prove through the blockchain that you have 1 million bitcoins.
Because the blockchain is other people's computers, right? Bing Ran.
Well, it's being replicated across like all these different networks so that we can, right, reproducibly like show that like
I mean, kind of.
that
kind
say
of
he
is.
has 1 million Bitcoin and you have 1 million Bitcoin.
Yeah, so it's like a big spreadsheet in Excel.
It's long
So
said about the
it's like the same spreadsheet is distributed across all the computers.
So they can
it's not
verify
like
it,
you own,
yeah.
Bitcoins in the USA and then in Switzerland, it's the same ledger. So it's everywhere at the same time and nowhere at the same time.
So, but a way that he could do it, just that occurs to me, is like, let's say he has 1 million Bitcoin, then one way could be to just break it into 10,000 coin chunks and sell those off gradually. And so then he wouldn't get a price hit, and also he could stay relatively anonymous. Or more anonymous.
I expect there's all sorts of things you can do if you have a bunch of attorneys and kind of people who normally handle gold.
Just are in that
sort of
space.
thing. It's like, if you have somebody who is absolutely trustworthy, like Swiss private bank or something, where they can create like 100 addresses for you, they can store the private keys. Somebody's going to believe them that they haven't written private keys
Sure.
before selling it to you. That's my kind of thing with the and nobody can ever change the password thing. It's not like, okay, you sold somebody the rights to your bank account, you showed them that you have $100,000 on your Bank of America account, and then sold them the password or something like that. And they trust that you're never going to call
And that you're the only person who's...
Right, you're not going to call customer service and get your password reset, and they're going to be able to change the password. Bitcoin doesn't have customer service, and there's no password reset, password change. That's the
And they would have to trust that you're the only person,
Yeah.
they're the only person you're selling it to.
Yeah, that's why I think only if you did it and you had like a bunch of accountants, attorneys, bankers saying, we created this, we know it, we haven't told the original guy, he's moved them into these wallets, now we're going to sell the wallets as if they were the keys to bullion deposit boxes. Maybe you could do that. Nobody trusts you.
I'm sorry, I kind of confused the question. The question is, how do you prove somebody that you own a Bitcoin?
Quite easily, but if you sell them the private key, there's no way of proving to them that you're not going to do other things with the private key afterwards because it can't be changed.
So yeah, they're trusting you to never log into it again and pull that money out,
Yeah.
which would be the trust issue.
That's why selling them like this is a terrible idea.
But I guarantee you that if you are selling stuff like this at that large amount, trust is going to be a huge issue because the types of people that are buying at that price point are people that you probably wouldn't want to double cross.
No, just because if it's someone who's got enough money that they could swarm you with attorneys.
No, I do.
At minimum.
Swiss bankers on it. Literally, I just say, okay, we're going to pay Rothschild Company to create 100 Bitcoin addresses. I'm going to send stuff into them because everybody trusts them when they say they're there and they've got the keys. It's going to be credible. These are just going to move around inside their vault anyhow or whatever.
So I mean, that could be like an interesting third-party workaround service that would be offered privately. Like, say if that was like a Swiss bank, like, we do this thing, we're only telling our premier clients about it because it's probably illegal and you'd have to trust us. But they're also dealing with people who could destroy them if they get screwed. So there's a certain level of trust out of fear that way.
Aren't these technologies, like, they're not really designed to be resolved, right? Like, I mean, like, this trust issue with, like, Bitcoin's not designed to address this kind of a problem, I don't think, right? Like, aren't there other, like, Monero, aren't there other things that are designed to work specifically for these kind of, like, to work with this privacy in mind?
I see what you're...
To work around this trust system that you're talking about, to not have to do that at all? Isn't that the idea?
There was a big
Zero knowledge proof.
case
zero
with
knowledge.
the police where you see, for example, the last year we had this virus that blocked your computer, ransomware, right? And
Right?
yeah.
The North Koreans made it.
So you have this virus, right, and you deposit the bitcoins in a public account. So everybody knows which account it is, right?
Yes.
But no one knows who it belongs to. But what if suddenly there's a coffee shop right next door that accepts Bitcoin, and you see that this address is sending Bitcoins every Monday at 8 a.m., right? So it kind of shows you that if you go to that place at 8 a.m., there's a big chance that there's someone buying a coffee with this account. So they can trace you with that, right? Because
Yes.
every transaction is public, and if I'm in a McDonald's and I see that the McDonald's has a specific account, and well, there must be like a physical contact in the end. So Monero, what I understand it does is it generates like tons of fake data. So in the end, you never know what the actual data is and what the real transactions are being made. So it's another layer of of privacy to
Obfuscation.
yeah, because if you see that this account, for example, when I don't know how it's pronounced, but MTGOX and Mt. Gox, they got hacked. There was an account that received all the bitcoins. I think that was the case, right? And it was later traced to another exchange, and that's like the main investigation. But every bitcoin can be traced how it's moving. So if you are dealing with dirt money or terrorist money, then it can literally be traced and like get to know who's the real owner, because I mean you're not destroying your money.
Yeah.
For that.
That was a big misconception with Bitcoin back in the day. People were like, it's anonymous money. And I'm like, no. Cash in your pocket is anonymous money. Like,
I think it still is. I think people
Yeah.
still feel that way.
Cash is
constantly.
literally the best anonymous money at this point. Except for like micro dots or whatever they put on it.
But people. Oh, okay.
Sorry.
You.
Well, I mean, they can't really track the microdots. It's not like they microdots scan every place that it goes. I mean, I guess if you take out money from the bank, would they be able to trace it back if I bought something illegal with that cash?
Probably, but I mean, they would have to like. It would be one data point in an ocean.
But dude,
that would be confirmed that. If you bought something illegal,
with cash.
With a dot. What was it? Microdot.
I don't know what microdots are.
where they spray the cash with.
Oh, this is only if there's like a bank
ID
robbery.
tag.
This is like
Yeah.
a bank robbery,
Yeah.
and
Oh, okay.
So if I were to pick up
it's
my-
actually DNA barcoded.
Oh, really? Nice.
So
So that
the
dollar.
identifier is actually like some algae bacteria DNA or something that is like modified in subtly different ways for each patch or whatever.
So that's a super neat hack I had no idea about. So if I'm understanding this right, banks are taking some of their dollars and they're spraying them.
So it's like they have devices that if you have the like.
Oh, at a teller. So if they're handing out.
So
Okay.
like if you like rob a cash truck or something like the containers that they carry the money in have anti-theft devices that if they're tampered with and you try and break them open,
They'll spray. So in this case, they'll spray a bacteria all over the money.
But it's colored. You can see the colors. Red.
I think it's two different things we're talking
there's
about.
two different things. One of them is red and it's designed to make it obvious to the human eye
That it was
that it was stolen. And another of them is designed to be invisible and decodable using essentially DNA barcoding.
Right.
Which is
And-
interesting
Yeah.
because you can't see it.
Yes.
And you wouldn't know it was there.
Yeah.
So okay, so
And you can also trace it to a specific.
Absolutely.
Would you like dip in bleach though?
It's a good
Well,
question.
would that not destroy the ink on the paper?
I mean, if you
DNA is
gave
more
it-
sensitive than ink.
if you
generally,
gave
so
it,
good
like,
point,
I mean,
yeah.
I would imagine it would destroy the ink on the paper if you left it in there for an hour.
So
but
just a quick dip
just
check?
like I don't know, maybe 30 seconds in, I feel like.
well, so you could do something else than bleach that might not harm the ink.
There's more
Like you could use.
specific enzymatic attack on the DNA, I think.
Yeah. So just so I have the full chain here. So you said, and this is something that's in place right now. Okay. So so if you're
this stuff on rioters,
on what?
on riots and stuff like that as well.
Oh, to mark people.
Oh, I've heard of those.
Use people on what?
They use it on rioters,
Huh.
so they can invisibly mark them.
Or an ATM thieves.
Wait, so okay, so is it the same thing, or they just basically? So we're going to spray these rioters with bacteria that is a certain form of DNA that we've tracked, so that there's no other way that they could get this bacteria on them
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, and they can confirm that they were at a particular location.
when a riot happened.
Yeah.
That's messed up.
Yeah,
That's crazy.
yeah.
Wow. Wow.
But so someone goes into a bank to rob it. And this is something else that someone like, okay, so if they'll take a bag, classically they'll put in a paint bomb, but then they'll also just like spray this bacteria in
I
it.
think it's probably they don't actually displace doing the paint thing because it's like you're more likely to catch people if they think they've got away with it
They
and
can
don't
spend
take
it.
precautions. Yeah.
So then some poor stripper now has like, because a guy is like after the party, he's making it rain, and she's got like bank bacteria just wrapped all over her. And then she just gets like, listen, I don't know anything about it. I'm just in this club. Yeah, sure, honey. Let's bacteria check you under that bra there. And
Anyway, that got real weird real quick.
I don't know. Just real world implications.
The
PG-13.
the petroleum industry has done something similar with gasoline for years, where they put chemical markers in their specific brand of gasoline. So if that gasoline gets stolen or a truck gets hijacked or something like that, you can tell which, even down to which refinery it came from.
Wow.
Oh, but there's a company that is like you want to have like this movie Black Panther just went out on cinemas, right? But you want to have that on your living room, right? And you want to pay $20,000 for that.
Just for the live same day, you could see the movie the same day it's released.
I mean, there's a big problem. It's piracy. What is you can pay $20,000 and then upload the movie and sell it online, and you can easily get the money back because it's a
Hot movie.
cinemas are country, but they don't have the movie yet.
I
But
was thinking about this a few days ago.
but this company came out with these images that they can trace in the
steganography.
yeah, so they can know who uploaded the movie online because there are images they can see
It's
right in the
watermarked.
movie, like watermarks on the movie, on the actual movie.
So like maybe are they images that are outside of the visual range but are still encoded?
I don't know how they do that.
You can basically get away with using enough pixels to encode steganography that it just looks like imperceptible noise.
It could just be like, yeah.
Like a tiny degradation of the picture, but it's imperceptible.
It'd be like in the corner in a shadow. It would be the blacks would be slightly different.
What makes it challenging, I think, if you know what encoding the file is going to be in, then it's quite easy to do.
To filter for it.
Yeah. So what I don't understand about if they've managed to like conquer this, then that would be like their kind of crown jewels. Would be if you have this kind of data, say in a DVD, and then you film the DVD using a camera.
Like an
and you
HD camera.
Yeah, and then you encode it into H.264 instead of being an M2B on the DVD disc. But whether you're going to be able to get steganographic data encoded across that many transcodes, I don't know. That seems like that would be really, really challenging. It's just
That's
like,
actually a problem for spam accounts and bots on Twitter. So the profile images are sorted, and they know like the hash of your entire picture, right? So if someone else is uploading a new profile with the new picture that you're using, they know, okay, you're the same thing. You're the same person.
Right.
Or you're trying to pretend that you're this guy.
But if you run the tiniest like Instagram filter on an image, then the hash is obviously going to be completely
Well,
different.
it's like
So
an
you can just-
adversarial attack as well.
Actually, they just compress the whole image, and so you don't notice because it's already a small avatar. But you just compress the image in just a certain point that the whole image recognition model or the hash is going to be different. So that's it.
I was thinking about adding little pixels to the movie thing. I was thinking, what if you created a fake movie theater? Because I see movie theaters all over the place, like little towns and stuff. It seems like you could somehow get around the verification, right? Like, what if you were getting these films, and, that you had them sent, and then like you'd put them up on Pirate Bay's free. I don't understand why anybody risks a really expensive fine to put, it's not a charity. I don't think people who pirate movies are charity.
The philosophy, right? There's a philosophy about copyright and IP laws, right? People think that things perhaps should not be copyrighted.
All information should be free.
So these aren't people who are illegal.
They're not necessarily making money off it, although they could be.
Why would you go into a movie theater with a camcorder and possibly get caught and charged with
Well, the people who are bootlegging from the movies are usually then selling them as hard copies and making money. It's just then also someone will get that disc that someone bought on the street and then digitize that and upload it to Pirate Bay.
No, I mean, it's because you get so much like response from people. If you're the first guy,
Then you're
The notoriety of it.
So it's all credit. Yeah, you.
Scene kid.
Well, it's the nature of the society we live in. I don't think it's actually that complicated of a thought that when you see anything now, someone is standing around filming it with their phone. You know, if there were more people here, I wouldn't be surprised if someone would be standing there filming us right now.
I think we are being filmed anyway.
Even though we're filming this thing ourselves, like
Yeah.
it's so normal, and you go to anything, and it only makes sense that someone would film a movie as well. Even though I think the better choice would be to turn that crap off and just watch the movie.
Well, there's a significant amount of difficulty involved in filming movies, though. There's people are just visible from behind the screen in the audience, which they don't realize. There's people like looking through their spotting, trying to find cameras that are shooting to boot them out and get them in further trouble. So there's even like a further level than that, but people are still willing to do it for the credit and also
and
for
there's
sales.
theaters where they don't care at all.
That's true too. Yeah, they don't bother with that.
I was looking at I was trying to find a bootlegged copy that wasn't a camcorder version of War of the Planet.
For research, right? Just for research purposes.
Actually,
Yeah.
I wasn't. This is all a lie. I'm just
Okay.
lying to you.
Wait, which time are you lying? Go on. Sorry.
I'm just lying. This whole thing's a lie.
Okay, great. Continue.
So I was trying to find this is a lie. I was trying to find a torrent, like a pirated version of War of Planet of the Apes, and it's on tour in my Ubuntu virtual box.
This is a really detailed lie. Please continue.
That's how you know it's a lie. It's the detail.
Yeah, it's too much detail. Right.
So I was doing that, and I couldn't find anything that either wasn't a virus or wasn't a camcorder. It seems really hard to keep these files so secret, but they're kept secret even though
There used to
they're
be
all over the country.
in back in the day, back when the internet was a thing, there were release groups that would get access or have access or work in the movie industry that would come out and digitize, whatever latest.
It's like an advanced screener copy,
Right.
like people get for the Academy Awards.
Right.
Yeah.
And they had private file repos, FTPs that you can log into and participate in, and you would get the latest Avatar or whatever it is you wanted, right? The latest Bill and Ted's, you were looking for that one. What happened? Did they go more underground, or have they literally just been extinguished?
Well, I
More
think.
underground.
Yeah. Okay. I was
They're
gonna
all
say.
there.
There's some of it has been stopped at the source too for some of these, like because they started encoding the screeners, which is funny. Like they started coding the advanced screeners per actor that they were sent to.
Wow. Yeah.
So I think even so for the Academy Awards, people are supposed to vote on these movies, and the people who vote are supposed to be in the Academy of Motion Picture and Sciences. So it's basically, the actors, writers, directors who make these movies who are voting. And so they would each get courtesy copies of the movies if they hadn't seen them all. So it would be like a high resolution copy that they could watch at home and then vote on the movie or not. Digital was it even?
I wouldn't watch it in a theater though.
Because
You can't. You're busy. You're a film producer. We just need you to see the movie and give your review tomorrow.
there might be like a couple hundred movies that are all being voted on.
Right.
So if you remember, I think it was a Hill Street Blues, his character actor Dennis Franz. I think it was him. So it's like you see a picture of him. You've seen him a bunch of times. He looks a lot like the neighbor on Aqua Teen Hunger Force.
Oh yeah.
So in fact, I think it's like based on him. Some scene group was busted because they were using a screener of some movie that was sent to Dennis Franz. Like they had encoded that movie as going to him without telling anybody they were doing that year.
Wow.
And his screener showed up and he was busted. And he was like, oh shit. And he probably just loaned it to an intern or something. Here, check this out. But so there's some of that drying up at the source now.
I could just imagine him opening the door in like a tank top and a gold chain. What is this?
What? Hey.
Okay. Well, on that note, I think that we wrapped up Hack Day. So we at this
Woohoo.
at this point, you can go around and talk about what you're working on, pitch anything, pitch any events that are coming up. Basically, this is your time to shine. So where people can find you, you can do. Yeah.
Can someone else start?
Yeah. Who's been here before that wants to start?
I'll start and go.
Yeah, go ahead.
Hey, I'm James Beach. I'm a writer. You can see some of my novels, science fiction, fantasy, short stories, and novelettes on Amazon.com/author/James Beach, Beach, and that's been fun.
I'm Cameron Seabach. I'm a musician and a software engineer. My old album, Towering Love, is actually coming to Spotify and iTunes later this month, so that'll be cool. You can search for Towering Love or Ham Sandwich Quantum Party, and it should show up.
Oh, and your recent album is Alien, the Alien album?
Yeah, the Alien album is coming out at the end of this month. So.
And I'm Francis Jarvis, and I'm studying Silicon Valley tech culture, writing my PhD at the moment. Also working on an augmented reality app for tenant sites right now, live in San Francisco and New York. It's called Augmented because it's augmented reality for renters, and it's on the App Store now.
I'm James Sundquist. I have a award-winning solo show which I'm going to perform in about a month, just a few blocks away from here. I'll post about it to the Noisebridge Discuss list. And also in about a week, I'll get announced for the Fall San Francisco Fringe Festival. I'll maybe making a new show for that.
I'm Jack. I don't know.
What grade are you in?
7th grade.
Okay.
Unfortunately. Yeah. So I'm here. I don't know. Nothing
Yeah.
to say.
I like your LinkedIn. It says school child/crypto expert.
You can see my picture. That was my yearbook picture.
Yes,
I don't
very
know.
nice.
That was one of my favorite cardigans.
Very professional. All right.
I'm Ignacio, and I'm just visiting San Francisco. I do a lot of data science and software development.
So if they want to follow you on Twitter,
This is gonna be hard because it's a Spanish name. So you can find me on Twitter at /Nacho Gomez, and that's it.
it sounds pretty easy to me.
Really?
Yeah.
Wait,
Yeah.
what is it?
Nacho Gomez.
Not sure.
So that's
So I spelled
NACHO,
That's actually this. Yeah, it's just as Nacho.
So I
That's
spelled
like
like
the
the chip.
That's it. Because when you call someone Ignacio as their legal name, the first name, you can just refer to them as Ignacio.
We could see that on actually Better Call Saul. There's a character whose name is Nacho, whose full name is Ignacio.
Yeah, no, nachos were invented. I only learned this the other day. Nachos were invented by a guy
Ignacio.
called Ignacio.
Really?
Okay,
Oh, that's beautiful.
Actually, they kind of one bit.
Well, there you go. As usual, I'm Dan Gailey. You can find me on Twitter at @DPG. You can find me on Facebook under Dan Gailey. You can write me at dan@synapse.ai. I am the founder and CEO of synapse.ai. We're doing decentralized AI. So if you're interested in any of that, reach out to me. And that's the end of Hack Days. Thank you, everyone, for coming out and sharing your insights and wisdom. And as usual, be excellent to each other and hack the planet.
Also, buy Bitcoin.